Your client-side JavaScript is starting to mold. It's starting to resemble a bad spaghetti code, and it is time to add structure, but it won't take too long. Gotta get your truth out of the DOM. Take your data in the models that you cannot lose. We'll render out your models with the help of the views. And if you don't want your JavaScript to end up like a mess, it's time for the anatomy of Backbone.js at codeschool.
You're watching the Anatomy of Backbone, and this is level 2, where we're going to take a look at Backbone models in a little bit more detail. So, remember from level 1, we defined a model class, like so. We then defined a model instance, like this. Then to get an attribute, we would call get. To set an attribute, we would call set. So when our to-do page loads, the first thing we're going to want to do is to fetch the JSON data from the server. How would we do that in Backbone and load it into our model? So here's our to-do item instance. We can set the URL to get JSON by setting the URL property, and then we can populate the model from the server by calling .fetch. This is going to go to that URL, pull down the JSON, load that into our model, and then we can call get to get that data out of our model. Now the URL that we have here, /todo, isn't a very good URL, right? Because we're talking about one to-do item and we're calling /todo. So how might we fix that? How might we do this in a more RESTful way? Well, if we go back into how we define our model class, we can specify a URL route. By default, it's going to use that URL to get data from our server, and it's going to interact with our server in a RESTful way, using sort of the Rails flavored version of REST. To fetch the to-do with ID of 1, we simply send in the ID when we define our to-do instance. To fetch the data for the to-do, we just call fetch. That's going to do a GET request to the to-do/1 URL. It's going to return the JSON and populate the instance with that data. To update the to-do item on our client, we call the set command. And then if we want to synchronize that with the server, like we saw before, we call the save command. And in this case, it's going to do a put request to the to-do/1 URL and send the JSON parameters with the model data. What about when we want to create a new to-do item? What might that look like? Here we define a new instance. We set the data. We're going to set the description, save the to-do item, and that's going to do a post request to /todos with the JSON parameters. We can see that this to-do item was properly created on the server because when we call get ID, we get back the number 2. Then if we want to destroy this to-do item, we can simply call destroy, and that sends a delete request to the todos/2 URL. If we ever want to get the JSON object out of our model, like maybe when we want to render it into the view later, we can call toJSON. Another nice option when we're defining the to-do item class is the ability to specify default values. So here you can see we're setting defaults for both the description and the status attributes. So now when we create a new to-do item and we call get description or get status, it returns the default values. One of the unifying concepts of Backbone.js is the use of events. And the first place we see this is at the model layer. So here you can see we're defining an event. Event can be named anything. So here you can see we're listening for an event called event name on our to-do item instance. When the event name event gets triggered, we're going to call a function here, which we'll call an alert. To trigger this event, we can just call trigger event name. This may look really familiar if you already write lots of jQuery. Now, Backbone models already come with some special events that will get triggered on their own. The most common one you're going to see is the change event. So here we're saying, listen for some changes to our model, and when that happens, call the doThing function. Our doThing function might be declared elsewhere, and you can see it just gets called here. If we called set on our to-do item and we changed an attribute, this would automatically get triggered. If we wanted to set the attribute without triggering the event, we could send in the silent parameter like so. And if we want to remove the event listener, we can just call off instead of on. To listen for an event, we call the on function and send in an event and a method. What are the special events? Well, the built-in events that come with Backbone include the change event that we just saw. We can listen for a change on a specific attribute. We can listen for when the model gets destroyed, when it's synchronized with the server, when there's an error. And finally, we can listen for when any event is triggered using the all event. So now we've talked a little bit more about Backbone models. It's time to jump into the challenges, and when you come back, we'll talk about Backbone views.